Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to this week's episode of Couch Trip Therapy for Everyday Life. That's your subject matter expert and therapist extraordinaire, Eddie Reese. I'm Billy Courtwright, and we have a conversation happening, which we're going to continue on air. And it started with me asking some simple questions about some words that we hear a lot. And we're going to talk about why. And the fact that I consider myself a pretty bright guy and think I know what they mean based on the context for which I've heard them. But as I'm talking to Eddie, I don't. And so it dawned on me anyway, and Eddie and I are going to talk about it in our episode, that maybe there's some people out there like me that are misunderstanding or misdefining these words. And, I don't know if it's because of the media environment we're a part of or the fact that on social media, everybody has a microphone, or just the amazing volume of content we have to consume. But there seems to be a group of words, let's say, that have come into vogue, I guess, over the last 10 years. And some of those words might be narcissism or misogyny or gaslighting. And it dawned on me anyway that these words are often psychological or behavioral in nature. They're cool sounding words that I think people probably have an idea what they mean, but based on what we hope to uncover in this episode, we really don't know what they mean, at least not from a therapeutic psychological perspective. But I do wonder, Eddie, to the best of your ability, could you describe, what happened throughout your career where some of these words started um, becoming used or used more, and then, why they continue to show up and who's using them. And if we can figure out what they mean, I think that would be enlightening, not only to me, but perhaps our audience. So I'll, in the
Sure.
form of a question, the three words slash phrases that I brought up, which I think everybody listening or watching would say they've heard at least once before. But I'll be the first to say I'm not exactly sure what they mean. And that would be the concept of gaslighting, the term or issue of narcissism, and misogyny. And it just so happens that outside of maybe gaslighting, which I think I've seen applied, all of these terms were used a lot during the last election cycle. And I think you'll know exactly for whom they were used. But what's going on? Where do these words come from, and why are they popular now? And what the hell do they mean?
Well, I'll start with your comment that everybody has a microphone now. You know,
All right.
I'm, like-
Dun.
I'm like, yeah,
It
they
was
do.
it was a figurative
Yeah,
based on the
Billy.
social
Yeah,
media
Billy and I
access we
have
have.
a microphone. Yeah, where do these words come from? I it takes me back to gosh, the beginning of my schooling, and the big word then was codependent and
Mm,
codependency and recovery, and then it was Suzanne Summers, for those of you that aren't old enough to know who that was. She was an actress. Um,
I can't get the Thigh Master
and,
out of my head now.
that she did advertise for the Thigh Master, didn't she? But she wrote a book, a memoir, and used the term an adult child of an alcoholic.
Mm,
And that was big for a long time. The 12-step group that I went to, because it was a big deal back then. This is how big of a deal it was. I lived in Sandy Springs, and there's a huge hospital not too far from where I live, the Northside
no,
Hospital.
so yeah.
They had a monstrous cafeteria. And our 12-step meeting was adult children of alcoholics, and there were 250 people at that meeting on average on Saturday morning. which is an enormous amount of people on a 12-step group. Most 12-step groups are anywhere from 3 to maybe
A dozen.
23
Yeah.
people, at the most. So it became this kind of, fad, really, and I had been out of 12-step for a while, and I went back to the meeting one Saturday, and there was, like, 5 people there, and instead of taking up the entire cafeteria, we were sequestered off in a room somewhere. So that's how much it changed. So I say all that to say that these words come and go.
Mm.
You don't hear adult children of alcoholics too much anymore. Still hear codependent, um, but in the general lexicon, I don't hear codependency that much anymore. Mm,
Yeah, I
So,
think you're right. These words tend to, it's almost like they latch on to a pop culture issue or pattern, and then, they become in vogue or popular even, and
mhm,
they do sound kinda like people tend to sound intelligent if they reference them
yeah,
even, incorrectly. And then pop culture, things move on. But, like, the biggest one for me is, like, I never heard the term gaslighting, and then all of
mhm.
a sudden I did, and I heard it everywhere.
Yeah, well, um, probably not old enough or you're not a big fan of black and white movies to watch the movie Gaslighting with Betty Davis.
I
Yeah,
did
it's a
not.
great movie, and if
If it's
you
Betty
wanna
Davis, it's probably it's a few
yeah,
years ago.
it's intense. And she's, married to this guy who gaslights her,
Mhm.
um, which
And for those that don't know, let's go there.
basically it makes you crazy,
But it's
because
it's it's kind of a to the best of my understanding, it's someone knowing that they can leverage kind of almost like a denial of the truth that inevitably eventually drives the person crazy, or kind of
yeah.
references the fact that they might be crazy and they're imagining all these things. Is that right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's a way of if someone has a complaint about you, you somehow turn it around and it's their problem,
Right.
or they go off to something unrelated that becomes your problem, and then you're not even talking about the subject anymore.
Right.
So it's kind of a you're always a moving target.
Yeah, it's like a deflection. This
Mhm.
isn't yeah, it's not a me problem, this is a you problem, and the fact that you even
Right.
think I have a problem means you're nuts.
Right, and very often without saying anything like that, so watch that movie, you'll see a great example of gaslighting.
Do you see it more often now than maybe a decade ago in therapy?
In terms of the word,
Or just what you would maybe they don't even know what they're describing, but you would describe it as gaslighting?
no, I don't know that I use that term
Mm,
because and we begin this piece of it that what happens when a word gets into the lexicon like that? People set it up as a good guy, bad guy scenario. If you're someone who would stay involved with someone who is gaslighting you, then you've got your own set of issues that need to be worked out. And to blame it all on the other person doesn't make any sense to me. You picked them, you stayed with them, you complained about them for years to your friends, people, but what's that about? Okay, so it bothers me that it always gets set up as a good guy, bad guy, sort of victim perpetrator sort of thing. Even with like adult children of alcoholics, it's the alcoholic, and when they first put together the concept of codependency, where adult children of alcoholics came from, it's like, here's the codependent, here's the alcoholic. And so you tend to go good guy, bad guy. Um, and that's a real problem. And I see that as a real problem in our media, because they buy into that. They don't want to, spread the blame, so to speak. But it's not about blame. It's about looking at the dynamic of the relationship, no matter what's going on, rather than name calling, which it gets used as. Um,
Well,
you know.
wouldn't you say though that, in the same regard, physical abuse, which is a horrible thing, it
Mhm.
certainly took a minute for, I'll just say, women in our country or wives or battered wives to be able to step up and, and get out of a physically abusive relationship, or have society have some empathy towards a woman in a physically abusive relationship. And, whereas that probably came more possible or more accepted maybe in the 70s and 80s or 60s, 70s and 80s, you would know better than me. Like,
Mhm.
am I correct that the idea that mental abuse, verbal abuse, behavioral abuse, gaslighting, that sort of thing, like, that this is a completely different type of abuse that's, in my guess, I don't even know if this is true, but my suspicion is it's equally as damaging, if not more so. And as that becomes a topic of therapy maybe, or, treatment or medication, or, I mean, I is that the part of the lexicon, that you're talking about, where these things become, because I can think of a handful of movies that I've seen in the last 10 years where the perpetrator and the victim, there was no physical abuse, it was all mental abuse, but it was
Mm.
evil and it was difficult to watch.
Well, I mean, you're describing something that's been around since language was invented. So it's always been there, because back to my earlier thought of, there's always a drive for one person, one faction, one side to overpower the other. And so there's usually this battle. And what really happens in therapy is you do your best to help people learn that power is shared, and that you take away the need to overpower. Um, and
It's crazy to hear you
that's when
describe it
people
as a
get
need.
along. It is a need. It's a survival need. I mean, the survival instinct is, we've talked about before: fight, flight, flock, freeze. I mean, fight, you know, overpower. But even freeze, I mean, you walk up on a squirrel or a chipmunk or a hawk lands, and, they freeze. I mean, that they're trying to overpower being eaten.
Got it.
So who's gonna win? Who's gonna lose? Sort of thing. So that's just instinctual, and our culture supports it. Our legal system certainly supports it. There's, somebody wins a case, somebody loses a case. So there's a right, wrong, good, bad, all, and there's a fight for that. There, even somebody who, say, commits murder, that person's got some psychological issues that need to be dealt with, serious psychological issues, and need to be dealt with within the confines of a prison. But you don't just go, bad person, get rid of them, unless they're a sociopath, which still isn't a bad person. It's just somebody with some serious issues. And so
But there's not, that's another word, sociopath. Sociopath is another word that came into
Gosh, that's
vogue recently, last
yeah,
10 or 15 years, and I don't know that I know what that word means.
it's, that word, that's a really old word. Sociopath is pretty easy to spot. There's no conscience. There's no sense of right or wrong. They're not going, "I'm doing something wrong." Your standard criminal knows he's doing something wrong when he goes steal a car, or robs a bank, but a sociopath doesn't go, "I'm doing wrong," or "I'm doing bad, I'm doing what I wanna do." Because there's just no conscience there. There's usually no sense of humor. A lot of times there's, just kind of an inability to really connect. Now you got sociopaths that can have charm and the ability to, you know, bring people into their circle so that they can do whatever they want. Um, and but it's just a matter of, I don't have a conscience. This is my goal. This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to do it. I don't really care. I mean, it's even to say I don't really care doesn't make sense,
Mm.
because there's not a concept of caring or not caring.
Okay,
You
so
know,
this is getting compelling. So we've mentioned gaslighting, narcissism, sociopathy. Where my next one is how are sociopaths and psychopaths different?
they're really not. Um, it's just different terms depending on what. Yeah, I think it was. I forget which one came first, but somebody came up with one, and somebody came up with the other.
So like
But
if we're watching Norman Bates
hmm
and we're watching the film Psycho, would I be correct in drawing the conclusion that psycho is short for psychopath?
yeah, that's what it would be short for. But I don't know that Norman just had some issues. He had some other issues. You know,
Wait,
uh,
okay, mother issues, story for another
yeah.
day. Yeah, he had some gender
And
issues. Yeah.
yeah, and you don't know the backstory. I mean, was he murdering young women on a regular basis there, or was this a one-off, pun intended, sort of thing? You don't really know that backstory as to what that's about. So
No,
diagnosing would be
but for the sake of
tricky.
this episode, how would you, you know, layman's terms, talk about either real or misconstrued differences between a sociopath and a psychopath? You're saying
I
there's no
don't.
difference, it's just like a
Not
different
not
word.
really. Not no.
Psycho sounds
It's
better
just
than
there.
socio, by the way,
Yeah. I mean,
for a
if
movie
you're
title.
a little more dramatic, but sociopath is the term that I hear most often in my business, and it's the one I use. But I don't. I've come across this a few earlier in my practice. I don't anymore, but it's something that makes a hair stand up on it. Right? I
Frightening.
Yeah, well, in an odd way. Like I worked in an adolescent unit in a psych hospital really long time ago, and there was a kid that would come and go there an awful lot. Always some sort of suicidal gesture, really. And he had tried to hurt himself, and so we had him sequestered off. And during visitation, you don't get to visit somebody like that because they're often really a padded room at the time. And his grandmother came to see him, and so I was the person that happened to, catch her attention. And she was saying, "Yeah, I don't wanna see him." And I said, "No, he's, tried to hurt himself." And this is what makes the hair stand up on the back of your head because it said, like, "Nice weather we're having." She said, "Well, maybe he'd be better off if he accomplished that, trying to kill himself." And which well, I was just like, my goodness." And it turns out that she had a son that killed himself, her husband killed himself,
Oh, boy.
her father killed, and it was like every man in the family committed suicide. So, and here is this woman who looks at it as probably a better choice for the kid.
Well, I don't wanna make light of it, but what's going on with the women in that family?
I don't know if it was the women or her or what, but that's sociopathic. There's no sense of right, wrong, good, bad,
Right,
no sense of morality, if you want to use that word. No, it's just not there.
right.
It's just not there.
I heard an interesting kind of pivoting to a different word, but along the same lines. I heard a definition of the term narcissism, and it wasn't from you. We've talked an awful lot about narcissistic behavior, narcissism, and narcissists, and we'll get into it again. But the,
Mm-hmm.
the definition that I heard of narcissism about 5 or 6 years ago, which really resonated with me, just made sense, which was the definition that a narcissist, they just have, there's an inability to feel. There's a it's a there's a
Hmm.
lack of capacity for empathy,
Right.
and it's almost not it's not that they and it's not what like I always thought like narcissism and arrogance were synonymous, and this was a different definition. This was like, well, narcissism is really a lack of empathy, and it's a lack of empathy
Mhm.
because they just don't possess the ability to empathize. And I was like, oh, well, that's different. First of all, is that even accurate? And how could you
Yeah.
expand?
Well, the same is true for a sociopath. You know,
Yeah, a lot of this
there's
seems to be similar.
yeah,
That's why.
there's no ability that what I'm doing is hurtful.
Right.
Um, so yeah, but yeah, a narcissist doesn't have empathy, and but again, you got to look at the term and what it really means, and it's not a none of this stuff is all or nothing.
Right.
I mean, there are pure sociopaths. Okay, there are pure narcissists. On one end of the scale. But this entire culture is a narcissistic culture. It is built on being narcissistic, and in terms of, what was it, Saturday Night Live? Al Franken, me, Al Franken,
Yeah. Right.
it's
Well, yeah. I
so,
mean, with social media and the idea that we put on our
oh,
best to show the
yeah,
world we're all living lives of quiet desperation
eh,
behind the scenes, but when we get
yeah,
in front
but
of it, everything's perfect.
yeah, I mean, everybody has a microphone,
Yeah, I agree.
and they're acting.
And with that analogy, it's just that you think of the drama and the gossip and the news and the
Mhm.
conjecture that comes out of Hollywood over years and years and years and years about people in front of the camera. And then 2025, we all have the ability to be in front of the camera. We're all living our lives as if we're in the Inquirer every day or on TMZ. We're watching, not all of us, but some of us are watching
Mhm.
reality programs of celebrities, and we're trying it's there is a tether there. Like, there's what used to be reserved for Hollywood and
Mhm.
almost wackadoodle entertainment is now on my High Branch Way of Roswell, Georgia. It's everywhere.
Sure. It's I think it's the modern version of the carnival sideshow.
Yeah.
It's like, "Come see the bearded lady,"
Well, what the heck? You can't
and it's
shock anybody anymore.
apparently not. But I was what was our train of thought with narcissism, and empathy, that they don't have empathy, which again, this culture lacks a tremendous amount of empathy. Empathy is really, and here's another word, empathy, that gets
Right.
knocked around, that's misused. Empathy isn't, so much "I feel your pain," you know? Empathy is I have felt my own pain. To become empathetic, you have to get in touch with the things inside of you that hurt and, were awful and sad and, all those things so that you can experience those, share them with somebody who doesn't try to fix it, which is codependent, to throw that word in. Somebody who really listens. So, simplified example is, oh, I really hurt. And, you know, well, I can see that, of course you hurt, you know, your dog died, your best friend died, of course you hurt. There's no trying to fix it. Great example is sitting with the dying. You know they're gonna die, they know they're gonna die, and you're not trying to fix it or change it. You're holding their hand through it. You're saying, I'm here with you." And in order to do that, you have to have gone through your own pain so that it doesn't, get triggered, and here's another word. I mean, they're all over the place. So that, somebody who is showing hurt, pain, anger, whatever, if you have gone through that and have had somebody give you that experience of holding your hand through it, then you're going to be able to do that with them. And that's what empathy is. So it's very lacking in our culture, because there's not a lot of places where you can learn it, and there's plenty of places in our culture where you're taught that empathy is bad, weak, something different, feeling sorry for people,
Which it
going,
isn't.
"Oh, poor baby," that's empathy. That's not empathy.
No.
So yeah, I think the takeaway from our conversation is be careful about using these words because they sort of fortify the misconceptions, and then that does a lot of harm, back to victim perpetrator when I don't see victim perpetrator and so much of this stuff. I see two people who really, really struggle with something, and they're trying to survive in that, and they were taught, that you win and then you survive and then the relationship works. I mean, couples come in and they're arguing, and we have to spend a lot of time with me explaining to them what an argument really is. I
Mm.
mean, people don't even know what an argument is. They'll somebody will say, "Well, honey, I'm just trying to get you to understand." I go, "You're arguing." "I'm not arguing." "Well, now you're arguing with me." You know? So, you are arguing. "No, I just want you know? So we don't even know what an argument is. And then so how are you gonna fix it? How are you gonna change it? How are you going to find some empathy? Which is one of the main things I teach, and try to instill in folks that come see me is awareness, this is an argument, um, and then how can you be kind and curious? Primarily, you go curious first. How can I be curious about where they're coming from, and then kind about that? And if you can do that, and really get to, I get what you're thinking or saying, or why you would say that. I don't have to try to explain something
Yeah.
to you to change that. And when you do that, the empathy tends to happen automatically. I think
Right.
that it's there. I mean, how many videos have you seen with some little kid, being nice to some little kid? I mean, so I think it's there because that's also about survival. I need to flock, get with the herd, and that's the way I do it. The monkeys going pick the mites off of each other. That's
Yeah.
how I do it.
Yeah. It's really incredibly interesting. From my business perspective, as you're talking, I think about like, how much more understanding or teaching or awareness, your word, around behavioral science and how it's
Mhm.
applied now. And I'm not sure if it's good or bad, Eddie. I just, in an effort to be more profitable or in an effort to raise more revenue or in an effort to gain more market share, companies and I'm party to this, so I know, but there are companies that are going in all kinds of different directions to find out more information and gain more understanding on how to get you to buy more stuff. And
Yeah,
it's
excuse me, and not only to buy more stuff, but to buy enough stuff to where we beat our competition. So you're trying to overpower.
Yeah, but
Um,
there's a lot of what you're saying, like, from I'm not a psychologist, but, like, I'm guilty of it. We use in discovery and value statements and differentiating statements. We're essentially trying to get to a place where that insecurity or shame or, desire for something else, if we can get if and we talk about this in marketing where we literally talk about gap and pain
mhm,
point and pouring salt and twisting the knife and it's
mhm.
pleasure island and pain island
Yeah.
and heaven island and hell island and the things that we use to describe what we
Oh,
do for a
yeah.
living, but it really is
Yeah.
all about that, like, as soon as we can get a consumer or a prospect or a
Mhm.
customer or a patient to
Right.
realize that what they want or think they want can be achieved by buying, enlisting, subscribing
Right.
to said program or product, that's how that product gets sold.
Right.
And
And especially over my competition. So, I mean,
yeah,
the
it's go
fact
from
that
a solution to the solution.
yeah, the fact that 2 car manufacturers see each other as competition. I mean, there's problem 1. I mean, that's, it's already started at that point. This is life and nobody wins. Nobody gets out of here alive. So, I think we're better off with cooperation and, you can compete without it being, all the terms that you're using, being a golfer, Jack Nicklaus was a great example of how you do that. He wanted to beat everybody's brains out, but he enjoyed it, it's, very famous moment in a major championship where Nicklaus and Watson are going at it at Turnberry, and, I mean, it's a heavyweight prize fight, One of them hits a great shot, the next guy hits another one, great shot right on top of it, and they're walking down the fairway, and as the story goes, it was, Nicholas usually, but it could have been either one of them, turns to the other and says, "This is fun," you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And it is, and it was for those guys. to where most competitors don't even acknowledge the other person, so and talks about getting into the ring with them, and you have to hate them, you know? You gotta beat the brains out, and it's there's just all this stuff built in, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that makes kindness and compassion difficult, which if empathy is hard to gain, then narcissism's gonna grow in its place. The
Yeah,
the appearance of being empathetic, narcissism isn't, I love myself, I think I'm great, even though I might be saying that as a narcissist. It's not what it's about. What it's and this is so difficult to understand. And I got it from this book here, Care of the Soul, Thomas
mhm,
More. There's a chapter on narcissism in here. Uh, but narcissism is a lack of self. So it's not self-love because there's no self. So there's in a sense, the person doesn't exist in their own mind. And so in order to function, in order to survive, they create an image.
mm,
And narcissism is about creating an image and then doing everything you can to foster that image and get people to
or
approve
live up
and
to it.
like
Yeah,
that image and then bolster that image so it becomes these people I deal with because they buy my image, though none of that is a conscious thought. These people over here, I don't deal with. I actually don't like them because they don't buy my image. So it's an image game, and the biggest fear of a narcissist is non-existence, then and that their image doesn't exist. They don't even exist to begin with.
yeah,
That their image doesn't exist anymore, that they become irrelevant in the world. So
yeah.
that's what narcissism is.
But even in the context of that explanation, you can see how this unique time in history is just set up image, perception. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
everything we look at.
Well, and it very much has been that way
Yeah, but it's
forever.
exacerbated. Yeah, I mean, think about it. We
Um,
with the daily posts and the reels and the videos and the memes and the, I
yeah,
mean, it's
but I mean, go to any time in history, and it's about that.
yeah, it is. But there's never been a time in history where you could post a picture of you and
No.
your child and look at your neighbor and their child and be pissed off because they've got more likes than you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's definitely hyper now. I mean,
Yeah,
it's to where people, yeah, yes, you know, kids, young people, what do they want to be when they grow up and they go famous? I mean, nobody in my generation would have answered it that way. Uh, I want to be famous. I mean, I want to be a rock star. I want to be a movie star. I want to be a pro, athlete, but even then, it's not about being famous. But they just want to be famous. And if you go doing what? They go being famous,
yeah,
because people wind up becoming famous just because they're famous. I mean,
right.
they, they, they have created this image well enough to where there's enough people who buy into it, like it, and then pay them for it, either directly or through advertisers, and advertisers pay them for it.
Eddie, last question, and I think this is a good place to wrap. And I have a million places we could go for next week, but is this good for business?
My business? Is what good for my business?
The reality that is this storm that we're this, narcissistic, gaslit,
Um,
image conscious,
no.
sociopathy rich, misogynist, freaking
No,
social media
no.
storm we're in.
Yeah, no, it's not good for my business because nothing's good for my business. I mean, it doesn't matter what age, I mean, you go back to Freud, it people are just as messed up then as they are now. It's just it looks different. But what's good for my business, we've talked about this before, is reducing the stigma of coming to see me,
Yeah.
which stigma is it would hurt my image. I mean, so it's a narcissistic move to go, "Oh, I don't wanna do that," Well, why not? Well, I mean, what do people think? What would people think is what will people and it's usually framed, "What would they think about me?" But it's not so much, "What would they think about me?" What would they think about their image of me?
Right.
Uh, and that's what we're really worried about. That's why this is such a narcissistic culture. It's the image of me because they don't even know me. And you're generally, if you say, "Oh, what would people think?" And I go, "Which people? Your closest friends? Your closest friends would think something's really not good about you. Maybe they shouldn't be your friend." I mean, no, they wouldn't do that. Well, then you're not worried about them. Who you worried about? And there's always these people. I don't know what would people, you know, think about me, I don't know. We'd have to poll 'em, 'cause we don't know.
I think in the hour that we just spoke, and it was a captivating conversation. I'm actually excited to re-listen to it. But when you think of it, in my perception, it feels like a unique confluence of events where you have a reducing stigma on therapy running into just a complete like fuel on the fire of an image conscious society,
Mhm.
faced with a little more understanding of some of the underlying principles, the words that we talked about, narcissism, gaslighting, and there were others. But it just, in my view, it just seems like a confluence. I could be wrong, but it just, and you said it many times, this has been going on for as long as,
Oh,
forever.
yeah,
But
humankind.
yeah, but it's just, it's so much. There's so, maybe it's just my perception of how easy it is to see and learn and share that these things tend to become more wave-like, but not like a wave that comes once, but almost like waves that just keep
Yeah.
coming.
Well, there's you gotta change your product in order to keep selling it. Most of the time it's new and improved. No, it's not really. It's just
Yeah.
you just added something that really makes it more complicated or whatever. Um,
In marketing, we call that a unique mechanism. It's
yeah,
Chevron with Techron.
with Techron, every gasoline has Techron. So I what was that? It was Platformate, yeah, Shell or Platformate. I had a guy that I worked with, this is back at the radio station, and he was worked for a company that measured the quality of gasoline, which is an odd, um, thing to do he's working for a radio station, and this is what he's doing. But he says, Platformate. He goes, Every gasoline's got Platformate in it." I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah." So,
Yeah.
I mean, but, Techron, there's probably no such thing as Techron,
Well, but again,
would be my
that different,
guess.
right?
It's a different name for Platformate. I don't know.
It is, and
You
it's what in marketing we call a unique mechanism. The
Mhm.
reality is, and again, this is a conversation we can have on another episode. Um, But the fact of the matter is, your value proposition is rarely unique. So in an effort to differentiate brands and to
Mhm.
differentiate services and to differentiate companies, they come up with what they can make is unique, which is known as a unique mechanism. Because
Right.
if we deliver the same product, but we do it
Mhm.
in a new compelling way, we can brand that new compelling
Right.
way as something, like I said, Techron or scrubbing bubbles or,
Mhm.
um, whatever. Now you're going to see it everywhere. Every product today has a
Oh,
unique
sure.
mechanism that makes
Yeah.
it better. Um, and it's just that when you're on the scale of 350 million people, a tiny move of the needle can amount
Sure.
to
Well,
hundreds of millions of dollars for some of these companies, and
yeah.
that's where we're at. But, uh, ladies and gentlemen, in the event that, by listening to this episode, you've gotten triggered, you found that
Gaslighted.
you're gaslit to discuss your lack of empathy for the
Right.
narcissist in your life, and you might seek some therapy to better collaborate, communicate, or coexist in a codependent relationship. I don't know how many more of these words I can throw in, but the reality is, if we were successful in lessening the stigma to the degree that you sought out a psychotherapist in your area, or maybe entertained a conversation online or in person, that would be great. But this is a really compelling episode, in my view, because I think that there's a lot of these concepts floating around for the reasons that we discussed today,
Mhm.
and maybe, like me, you've gained a little bit more clarity, and maybe it strikes up a conversation or a realization in your own life, relationship, or work where you're looking to perhaps affect change. So, this has been another episode of Couch Trip, and that's Eddie Reese, our resident psychotherapist, and I'm Billy Courtwright, and this was interesting for me. Eddie, I'll let you have final words for the audience, and I think we know, there's about 4 or 5 places we can go next week.
Oh, there always is, and I mean, this is fun, and you said something about you're looking forward to listening to this. I'm looking forward to see what they cut out. I mean,
Yeah.
that was
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
what are these
That's,
guys talking about? Then
yeah,
chop
yeah,
that off.
yeah. Yeah, there was yeah, well, it maybe it says something about us that we find this entertaining. But again,
Yeah,
we'll keep coming back and, we'll keep showing up. A reference to the 12-step program that, Eddie referenced in the first 20 minutes. Again, Couch Trip episode. We'll see you again next week. Bye.
yeah. Bye, folks.